Blessings, everybody. Welcome to the channel. I'm Dan, your host. I hope you're doing well wherever you may be, and I hope you're still enjoying the holiday season. It's about to come to an end with New Year's approaching. Today's episode is very important to me, as I'm sure you've gone through this issue with all the bands that you love and artists that you love as well. Today I'm specifically going to talk about bands only and not artists. Maybe I'll do a separate video, but these are the top 20 and ranked, mind you, bands who've let me down the most. So all these bands I'm presenting today are bands I really like or love. Most of these are bands I'm obsessed with. Most of them, I did a video on that previously. And we all have a personal relationship with the bands that we love and look up to and admire and that sort of thing, for their talent, their music, and that sort of thing. It's not a true relationship because we don't know these people in the bands personally, but we still have that type of metaphorical relationship because they're part of who we are as a person. They're part of our lives. They're essential to our lives in so many ways. And so let's go ahead and get started. Coming in at number 20 is the band Triumph. Now, I don't have props for most of these. I have a few, especially where number 1 is the one that hits home the worst, so to speak. You'll see what I mean when we get there. So number 20 is Triumph, and you have some really kick-ass albums with respect to their debut and the sophomore effort. And then when you get to around Progressions of Power, there's some really good stuff there. There's some songs in there that I don't like too much. But then when you get to Just a Game and everything after that, through and including Thunder 7, although Allied Forces and Never Surrender, I think, are their two best albums of all time. I think they're both masterpieces in their own right. And then Allied Forces, the best of those two. When you get to Thunder 7, there's a little bit of falling off, but I do like that album quite a bit. And then you get to A Sport of Kings. Here's Rick Emmett having his way for the most part, wanting to do something a little bit more commercial, a little bit more pop-oriented, because Gil fought him, and the rest of the band fought him for a long time. We got to have some heavy blues kind of stuff. But here you get much more commercial and pretty much flop as an album. It's okay, it's not great. And then everything after that for me, just not, Surveillance doesn't do anything for me. And then there's that last album where Rick isn't even in the band. Could do without that as well. So I thought there was going to be much more greatness coming out of Triumph after the wonderful Allied Forces and Never Surrender. And while it was a tad bit disappointing with Thunder 7, it did grow on me. There's some wonderful moments there. About half that album I think is quite good, if not very good. There's 2 songs on there that's very good. But like usual on that album, you have the etude or the classical acoustic piece, which is just phenomenal. That's one of them. So I expected more from the band after Thunder 7. I thought they had after Never Surrender. I thought the only way they could go was up, and I, of course, was mucho disappointed with that. So number 20 is Triumph. Number 19 is Blue Oyster Cult. Those first 3 albums are just dynamite. The black and white period, as critic Martin Popoff calls them. And then you get into the first album cover that has, color to it, and that is what I call the Sleight of Hand album, but it, of course, is Agents of Fortune. And then you get albums like, not necessarily in this order, you get Spectres. And then there seems to be a falling off after Spectres. You have Mirrors and Cultosaurus Erectus. The only song I really like on Cultosaurus Erectus is Black Blade. Big Michael Moorcock, Eternal Champion fan, those books. And, of course, Michael Moorcock wrote a couple songs or more with the band, that being one of them. The other one is Veterans of the Psychic Wars, also about the Eternal Champion character in those novels. But that's on an album I'm about to talk about. Mirrors has 2 or 3 songs. Cultosaurus only one that I like. When I listen to Cultosaurus Erectus, I keep going back to it every once in a while, see, what's what. Has anything grown on me? It just doesn't. It's all over the place, and most of it is just, I don't get it. So it's one of those albums. And then you get Fire of Unknown Origin, which is, I think, their second best album of all time after the third album, Secret Treaties. And then you get albums like Revolution by Night. Club Ninja has one good song, which is rather Dancing in the Ruins, which is many have called that song, because it has the same tone and vibe. Many people have called that Burning for You Part 2. Anyway, so and there's some moments on Club Ninja, but it's not a wonderful album. Imaginos is pretty cool. I like it, although production is lacking. And after Imaginos, there's nothing for me there that I like. So really the first front end of their discography is where it's at. So I thought, like Triumph, I thought after Fire of Unknown Origin, things were really going to go up with the band, and it went down. So number 19, Blue Oyster Cult. Coming in at number 18 is Styx. Out the gate, you have 4 albums on the Wooden Nickel label, and 1 has some interesting proggy moments. 2 has the prog still, but more commercial stuff as well, like the wonderful song Lady, which sounds like a later song because 1, 2, and then the next 2 albums are so raw and unpolished, so it's weird that it's a diamond in the rough release. And Styx 2 is actually, I think, a bit underrated. Then you get you get The Serpent is Rising, which of those first 4 is my least favorite, but there's some cool moments on it. It's rough. Then you get Man of Miracles, which you see the direction they're going. Then things really pick up with Equinox, and then especially with Crystal Ball, because of Tommy Shaw and his influence, really makes the band the dynamite band that it is for a short period. Because then you get The Wonderful Grand Illusion, you get Pieces of 8, and then Cornerstone comes out, and it's so disappointing. I do like Babe, but not much to like there, if you ask me, too commercial. And then eventually you get Paradise Theater, which is a fabulous album. Again, you think they're going to put out another wonderful gem after that. Nope, you get the horrible Kilroy is Here, and nothing since then have I liked. So Styx, number 18. So disappointed in that band. I've tried to like the new stuff that's been coming out, but it just doesn't do anything for me. 17 is, let me find it, Aerosmith. Wonderful. You have a great run from the debut. Then you get Your Wings. You get the 2 twin companion albums. They work well together. Listen to them both as a double album. That is Toys in the Attic and Rocks. You get Draw the Line. Then you get this snooze of an album. No Surprise, Chiquita are okay. The cover song, Remember Walking in the Sand, okay, I like that. And then everything else on here just doesn't do much for me. Think About It / Mia, and of course at this point, the guitarist was wanting to leave, and he did. Joe Perry, but then he comes back. All the drugs, it's pretty much where it starts here. I do like the comeback album, Rock in a Hard Place. I did a retrospective video on that. Check that out. Shameless plug. And then of course after Rock in a Hard Place, you get Done with Mirrors, which is still a bluesy rock album, but it's so disappointing. They even do a cover song of Joe Perry's Let the Music Do the Talking, which is weird. And then Permanent Vacation comes out, and I've talked about this before, how the band is garbage after that because they go into very pop commercial waters. Lost their edginess, lost their mojo, if you ask me. And of course, Steven Tyler, this is well documented now, said, he takes over the band, and there's a failed coup to get back to basics and get back to their roots, rather, and it doesn't work because Tyler reminds them, we're making a lot of money, so they stick to the pop formula. And I'm forgetting the name of the person who's involved in Kiss and Bon Jovi and Meatloaf and that sort of thing. Anyway, so who pushed them in that commercial direction. So Aerosmith coming in at number 17. What a disappointment. 16 is Genesis. You have a great run, not counting the first album, from Genesis to Revelation, but everything from Trespass through and including Wind and Wuthering, for the most part, are dynamite. There's a couple songs in Wind and Wuthering I don't like Watt Gorilla, or that kind of thing. Your Own Special Way, I think, is on there. It's way too commercial, hinting of foreshadowing what's to come, right? I do like parts of And Then There Were Three. I'm not crazy about it. I cannot stand Duke. I'm the opposite of Patrick Bateman from, American Psycho. And let's see, what else am I missing here? I have notes. Yes, here we go. Abacab, I like part of Abacab. Someone once said that Abacab is Genesis's answer to Moving Pictures by Rush. And that was intentional by Genesis. I don't know how true that is, but I kind of see it and I kind of don't. Anyway, and then after Abacab, there's nothing there for me to like. Genesis, Invisible Touch, We Can't Dance. Of those three, We Can't Dance is the biggest joke. I do like on the self-titled album Genesis, I do like Home by the Sea and Second Home by the Sea. That's kind of going back to their roots, sort of revisited. I love those two songs, and love is a strong word, but I do love it. But Genesis is just a huge disappointment going into such commercial waters that it was essentially it becomes Phil Collins really solo type style working songs like Tonight, and there's just a ton of those. It's like beer commercials. So Genesis coming in at number 16. Number 15 is the Scorpions. This is one I'm excuse me. This is one I'm close to getting over because you have a great run from the debut through and including Love at First Sting. And I love that first album. It's grown on me in the last 3 years. It leaps and bounds. I've always liked it, but it's an album I actually love. So, but after the great, the heavier run with Love Drive through and including Love at First Sting and everything in between, again, like so many bands that I'm mentioning here today, and I've mentioned already, I thought that there would be no place to go but up, and of course it was wrong. Savage Amusement and everything. Winds of Change with the whistling and the swaying thing with the candle, the lighter. I hate that stuff. So Cell Phone's the worst, but yeah. So Scorpions, number 15. Number 14, Rainbow. This perhaps should be up the list more, but that's where it is now. Those first two albums are marvelous. I love that first album. I know people who think the first album's okay, and hey, I respect your opinion, but I love that first album. Even Dio himself said that he liked the first album more than Rising, if you can believe that. It's on YouTube. You can check it out. It's a grainy 2 or 3 part video where he's on the bus and he's got the digipacks and he's talking about them. Can't see who's interviewing him. It's the video is really poor, but the audio is quite good, and it's wonderful because you get a taste of Ronnie being humble and yet arrogant at the same time. It's kind of weird. He's always that way, but regardless, I've always liked Dio, regardless of his failings. So is he perfect? No, but I do respect him as a person. I do respect him as a person, especially as a musician and his dedication to the craft. But you get to the third album, and there's some really kick-ass songs in there, like Lady of the Lake and Kill the King, and there's two more. But that last song is just a snooze fest. He's just crooning, Rainbow Eyes, and then there's songs like The Shed and Gates of Babylon, which are just okay. So that was disappointing. But the first 3 albums are still where it's at, even though some of the songs on the third album are disappointing. But when you get to Down to Earth, I was never on board with Graham Bonnet. There's not much to like there for me. I know for some of you that's blasphemous. If that album could have sounded more like the Graham Bonnet band, sorry, not the Graham Bonnet band, but the band that Graham Bonnet's in called Blackthorn, check out that album. If it was more like that, I'd be on board with that. It's heavy. It's probably the heaviest thing Graham Bonnet ever did. So, and then we get to the Joe Lynn Turner era, which I do like. I do. Of those 3 albums with Joe Lynn Turner, you have Difficult to Cure. I would say that's a good album. Then the next album, Straight Between the Eyes, I would call a very good album. And then Bent Out of Shape, I would just call a good album. Between that and Difficult to Cure, I like Difficult to Cure better. I've been listening to Bent Out of Shape off and on for the last 3 or 4 months, and initially I hated it, or nearly hated it. I thought it was close to not liking, but I would call it a good album. It's still disappointing because it's just uber commercial. But anyway, so Rainbow coming, and then nothing after that. You get the album with him as a Scarecrow, Richie. It just does the vocal. I don't like the vocals. I can't remember the vocalist. Is it Doogie? I can't remember his last name. So yeah, Rainbow, number 14. Number 13 is Yes. Not Yes, I Found It, but the band Yes. The first 2 albums are okay. Second album is better than the debut, like so many bands. But then you get into the Yes album, and what an album. That third album is where things really begin to take off for the band. And then you get albums like Fragile, wonderful. That is a masterpiece of an album. Each band member showcasing their talents. Many of the songs are, even though while everyone's playing on most of them, it's really about a particular individual showcasing their talents. The Wonderful Heart of the Sunrise, which is one of the holy grails for us bass players. The other one would be La Via Strangiato, just to name 2. There are quite a few. One would be King Crimson's Starless. That's probably the holy trilogy for us bass players who like that heavier proggy stuff. So back to Yes. Then you get Tales of Topographic Oceans. Oh, back to Close to the Edge. 3 songs, but what a dynamite album. That is a masterpiece. Tales of Topographic Oceans, I appreciate the sentiment. It's a little bloated. I do like it, but I'm not in love with it. I have to be in the mood to listen to it. I know it's a cliched response because everyone says that, but that's how I feel and that's how I am. But I do like it. I think I like tracks 1 and 4 the best. Anyway, then you get Relayer, which I think is dynamite. That's my favorite Yes album. Only 3 songs, but what wonderful 3 songs. You have the jazz fusion-y Sound Chaser. You have Gates of Delirium, and the part of that you have the you can get it as a single on a special edition. I think Soon. John Anderson is just what a beautiful voice he has, and especially in this piece. Anyway, so Relayer, and then Going for the One is okay. It's disappointing from all those albums I just mentioned that came before. I would argue it's better than the first album, the debut, but not the second. Then you get Tormato, disappointing. Some cool tracks on it, but not enough to satisfy my Yes, need, if you will. Then you get Drama. The only song I like on there is Machine Messiah. What a great song. Too bad the rest of the album isn't like that. Then you get into Genesis. They go down the pop song rap rabbit hole, and they stay there for a while with Big Generator and 90125. Yes, 90125. I wanted to say 90120. That's a TV show. And then you kind of return to the roots with, Reunion. It's not a true reunion album because the 2 bands are still in their schism. They're just, they're not, they all have songs on the album, but they're not intermingling amongst each other. You have Keys to Ascension, and it's just, there's just something missing. It's over at that point once you get to 90215, at least for me. There's a cool gem of a song here and a cool gem of a song there after Drama, but like Drama, there's one good song, just things like that, but not enough to rave about. So Yes, extremely disappointing, number 13. Cracking the top 12 now is Pink Floyd. Those first 2 albums, there's something very special about them. The first album is very English in a good way. It's very the vocal presence there is English, and what I mean by that, you have that British invasion kind of sound with songs like Bike and Scarecrow, right? I love that stuff. Think the Kinks, the early Who, Rolling Stones. Did I say the Kinks? Yeah. So the older I get, the more and more I appreciate than I did when I was a kid and a teenager, the British invasion stuff. Because when I was a teenager, I wanted everything to be heavy. Of course, that's ridiculous. But heavy music is my favorite. But I love those first two albums. You get Gilmour on the second album, and you get some longer stretches of songs, the beginning of epic tracks, and of course Barrett's on his way out because of his poor mental health, unfortunately. And then you get the soundtrack stuff, which I think is underrated. I've been listening to that stuff off and on for the last 2 years. I finally bought copies of all the soundtrack stuff, and I love that stuff. Not as much as the more proggier stuff in their best run, which is, so we'll talk about that now. Is Metal, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, and The Wall. And I do like Atom Heart Mother. That's wonderful, but in a different sense. It's not as good as those 4 or 5 that I just mentioned. But the meat of Pink Floyd's progginess would be Metal, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, and The Wall, culminating at The Wall. I do like what comes next, and that is the final cut. But compared to all that came before, the final cut is still disappointing. There's a couple wonderful songs there, and the rest is just, say, average or okay. And it's worth a listen every once in a while because it has a certain mood that goes with The Wall, because some of the songs that are on there tie into The Wall, because Waters was going to do an album called A Few More Bricks or something like that, and then I got panned and this came out instead. But he held on to some of the songs that made, I guess it's why it's called the final cut, maybe not. I'm going to do a video down the road, hopefully sooner than later, where I'm going to present an alternative playlist of The Wall that includes those songs and some others from other albums that have that connection, like the song Dogs. There's a connection. Wish You Were Here has 2 tracks where Pink's name is mentioned, right? So but I'll get to that hopefully. So Pink Floyd, and then still sticking with Pink Floyd, you get to the period that doesn't have Waters in it, which to me are not true Pink Floyd albums. I'm that type of person. I don't care much for The Division Bell and A Momentary Lapse of Reason, a fitting name if you ask me. And the last one that Gilmour put out, it's got the person in the boat, and the name of that it's very boring and dull and droll. I can't remember the name of that album. That of those 3, that's the worst of the 3. That I would definitely want to call Momentary Lapse of Reason and Division Bell. I would concede, let's call those Pink Floyd on some days, but never that last one. The Endless River, it's the endless snooze, if you ask me. Not to be ugly, but yeah, I love English bands, so Pink Floyd, definitely, because you're going to be let down the most by the bands that you love the most, right? Just as, when people you love the most let you down, you're going to be let down the most, as opposed to someone who's just an acquaintance or, that kind of thing, right? So Pink Floyd coming in at number 12, for me, a huge disappointment. British bands are my favorite. I think I've spoken this before. I'm going to do a video at some point, I hope, on why that's the case. I just culturally, something superior about them, I guess, with music. Although, ironically, my favorite band is Canadian Rush. So Pink Floyd, number 12. Number 11 is Dio. Once he goes solo, or the Dio Band. That first album is Nonpareil, if I'm pronouncing that right. One of the greatest debuts of all time, one of the greatest heavy metal albums of all time, one of the greatest rock and roll albums of all time. Definitely top 10 heavy metal albums of all time, I would say. And then you get Last in Line, which is very good, but it's disappointing compared. That's good. It's good. Approaching very good compared to nothing in Dio's catalog compares to that first album. Dio peaked too early. Then you get Sacred Heart, and there's the fighting with Vivian Campbell. We all know that story, us Dio fans. And then Dio said he would never go down the keyboard route, and he does with the fourth album, Dream Evil. You get some comeback albums with Lock Up the Wolves, which I love now. When it first came out, I thought it was good. Now I think it's fabulous. Killing the Dragon is very good, but not great. And Strange Highways is very good. It's people have commented it sounds like Dehumanizer, the Sabbath album, rightfully so. But overall, if you look at Dio's discography, it's still disappointing. So what could have been much better, much greater had Vivian stayed in the band and Dio paid Vivian, right? Anyway, number 10 is Judas Priest. So, another band I love. You get a shift in the band when Screaming for Vengeance comes out. You have that title track, which is very thrash metal-like. It's also uber power metal. It's a wonderful song. It's probably my favorite song on the album. We know that Halford can sing like that, but boy, he sings like that the whole song. I've spoken about this before. And then you get, which many fans, I forget the critic who called Defenders of the Faith, Screaming for Vengeance 2, not just because Tom Allen produced it, because of the overall sound. Some people said they don't get that label. I do. Those twin albums, you can listen to those as a double album, as I've talked about before. But then you get two albums back-to-back that are uber disappointing. Turbo, very hair metal-y, not what you want, at least from us. Like-minded Priest fans, I don't want to speak for everybody. Way too commercial. Couple of tracks laughable, like Parental Guidance, and there's another one. Well, the title track, I guess, Turbo Lover, close to being a title track. Ram It Down is abysmal or near abysmal. There's maybe one or two good songs in there. Now, Painkiller, we get is a return to roots, but not a return to roots, because the way Halford is singing is similar to Screaming for Vengeance, but not likable enough for me, because he's singing more like the way he does in Fight, which I like. And I do like the Painkiller album. I just don't love it. I wish there was more of a return to... I wish it sounded more like Screaming for Vengeance and Defenders of the Faith. And I don't just mean with respect to Halford's vocals. The guitar is different, and for whatever reason. Then you get the Tim Ripper Owens albums, which Jugulator and Demolition. I like the song Cathedral Spires on Jugulator, but there's a couple other songs I like. Okay. Angel of Retribution is okay. It's not great. It's very mediocre. Nostradamus would have been better had it been a single album. There's a couple of gem tracks on there, but overall it's pretty much mediocre. Then you get Redeemer of Souls, which I do like. That's much in my... And then the debut the EP that's attached to that, which I forget what it's called, this is a really good album. This is a much better return to form. This could be almost classified kind of as Scream for Vengeance 3. It has a similar sound, I think. Then Firepower comes out. I thought that was disappointing. The cover looks like they're trying to do the Scream for Vengeance thing with the yellow and the multicolored, except the angles of the machine robot are different from the eagle on the other album. I think and it's produced by Tom Allen. I thought it was disappointing. Scream for Vengeance 4 maybe, doesn't sound like it. Very disappointing to me. And then Invincible Shield I think is quite good, nearly great, but not. It's very good. And I did a review of that. I like this album quite a bit. So if we talk about everything from Turbo through and including Invincible Shield, their last album, there are only two albums out of those 10 that I like, and that is Redeemer of Souls and Invincible Shield. So that's why Judas Priest makes one of the most disappointing, one of the top 20 bands who have let me down the most. All right, so Judas Priest is number 10. Number 9 is Black Sabbath. I can't complain too much or whine too much about Black Sabbath, but they're still in this list because they have let me down. And that's because of Technical Ecstasy. I know this is cliched and everyone said this, and it is due in part because of Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die. There's some cool tracks here and there. On Never Say Die, you have the title track. I like that song quite a bit. I love Junior's Eyes. There's one or two other songs I like. Swinging the Chain is okay. You know, some jazz and some horns and stuff. It's not really what many of us Black Sabbath fans want from Black Sabbath. And Techno Ecstasy is such an odd duck, even when I think compared to Never Say Die. At least Never Say Die sounds like a Black Sabbath album. That song could fit on Sabotage, I think. I know some people hate that song, but I like it. 13, the reunion album with Ozzy, I think is lackluster. I never listened to it. I've tried to like it. Dio's third reunion with the band under the moniker Heaven and Hell, and as the band title because of Sharon, the Devil You Know. I listened to that and nothing grabs me, and I've listened to that so many times. But the Dio phase is wonderful. Dehumanizer, Mob Rules, and Heaven and Hell. Those are three wonderful, powerful, great albums in the discography. The Tony Martin era, of the four, I like Tear and Hail's Cross quite a bit, and then parts of Cross Purposes I do like, but I can't listen to it all the way through because some of the songs start to sound the same, and then the way Martin starts to emphasize some of the phrasing it gets a little bit redundant. But there are some good tracks there, and then Forbidden, I'm just not a big fan. So Black Sabbath coming in at number 9. You do have one of the great, if not the greatest, 6-album run of all time with the debut through and including Sabotage. But they are one of the bands who've let me down the most. All right, number 8 is Whitesnake. Here's why. The debut album, then you get, I love the debut album. I love Hunter. I hate the album cover. I love Ready and Willing. I love Come and Get It. Slide It In, and Whitesnake 87. They get all hair metally and kind of move away a tad bit from the blues, although there's still some of that blues stylings in the guitar playing, but it's more hair metally type blues kind of stuff. I like that. I even like the English version of Slide It In, but the United States version is where it's at for me. But I appreciate both. The wonderful thing about that Whitesnake did is they're pleasing both fans who like the bluesy, and either way, the Slide It In, both versions are a nice segue into Whitesnake 87, because there's some songs like Slide It In, the title track, and 2 or 3 others that have that hair metally shtick to it as well. But once you get to Slip of the Tongue, there's still that same hair metally with Steve Vai going on, but the album overall is very disappointing. And then everything after that is pretty much, with the exception of the reissued version of Russell's Heart, is quite good. But with the exception of that, everything else I think is quite disappointing. So Whitesnake gets in number 8 spot. Coming in at number 7 is Queensryche. Interesting album run that's very short. Talk about, got to include the EP, even though it's 4. If you get the bonus version with the 5th song, Prophecy. I don't know why that wasn't put on the EP to begin with. And then you get another reissue of the EP with the live stuff, which is fabulous. You have to get that one if you can still get that. I have that on CD. It's wonderful. And then you get The Warning, which I think is just short of a masterpiece. I think the sophomore full studio album, Rageful Order, is a masterpiece. And of course, Operation Mindcrime is a masterpiece. I still remember getting that on vinyl like the week it came out. I'm a teenager. Used to be a mall called the Lake Forest Plaza, which was in New Orleans East. That was the go-to mall in the 70s. And I see the sticker on the label before I pull the cellophane off it. It says, "It's as good as the wall. Yes, it's that good." And they weren't wrong, whichever critic wrote that. And then you get to Empire, which was disappointing and still today is. But I do like the album. Then you get to Promised Land. And I like Empire, I like Promised Land, but still disappointing because we wanted that more hip. I'm sorry, can't speak for everyone. Many of us Queensryche fans wanted Queensryche to stay in that Operation Mindcrime and Rage for Order mode, that heavy power metal stuff, instead of getting a little bit more commercial. You know, songs like, oh gosh, what's the big soft song on Empire? It's not getting to me. There's some wonderful bass and guitar and vocals and twin guitar on Empire, Promised Land. Very Pink Floyd-like, especially Promised Land and Here on the Now Frontier, because you have these audio insertions like a camera clicking or someone hailing for a taxi, you know, Della Brown. You have just that Pink Floyd-esque type things that Queensryche was going for. On Promised Land, you have the train and the guy walking through the gravel, which is kind of cool. I do like that. But you need more than that. So Queensryche's best run is the EP through and including Promised Land, although those two albums, Promised Land and Empire, is a little bit falling off. We wanted them to stay heavy. If you know Queensryche like me, you know that Jeff Tate wanted to move away from heavy metal, and that was part of the problem of him leaving the band and getting kicked out. But there's other reasons for that, right? His attitude and spitting on, you know, one of the band members. I forget who he spit on. But you get albums like Here in the Now Frontier, Q2K. Both of those albums have a couple really dynamite songs on them. Tribe is just awful. There's nothing appealing to that. There's nothing appealing on there to me. Operation Mindcrime 2 is a couple songs I really like. The one with Dio on backup vocals is just amazing, I think. American Soldier, I thought, was a snooze fest. Dedicated to Chaos. Even one of the band members said that it was a horrible album in the press. And then I forget which was one of the might have been the bass player or one of the guitarists. But Jeff Tate kind of forced him to take back those words. Anyway, but too late, too little, too late. So, and then if we talk about the Toddler Tour run, I appreciate the effort to get back to your roots and sound like the great Queensryche of old, but it just doesn't do anything for me. Especially that first album with Toddler Tour it goes nowhere. It's just called Queensryche. I think it's boring. It's uneventful. It's lackluster. There's no punch. There's no resonance. And there's a couple good songs on the albums after that. The best of the Toddler Tour albums, but I don't like it enough to buy it, is the most recent one that has the logo mascot thing from the Warning in like a DNA spiral, a helix. That looks kind of cool. And the album's okay, but it's not good enough for me to want to buy it. So Queensryche, one of the 20 bands who've let me down the most. Number 6. Let me find Iron Maiden. Yeah. Those first two albums, boy, they're wonderful. Paul Di'Anno. I wish he would stayed in the band a little longer, but I do love Bruce Dickinson much more than Paul. I know that's a contradiction or paradox. But those first two albums has a unification of the punk ethos with heavy metal. It's a little bit of both, pleases both crowds. Different, but in a similar way that Motorhead did that. Then you get Bruce as the frontman coming over from Samson. And what a job he did, sticking with the science fiction and history themes and, you know, horror movie stuff, right? You have what I call Black Sabbath 2 in Number of the Beast, because it's very similar about, you know, being taken over by a cult of crazy pagan altar, Satan worshiping, and I got to get out of here kind of thing. And then you have Invaders from the British TV show, which I used to watch as a kid. Run to the Hills, 22 Acacia Avenue. That whole album is a greatest hits album. Number of the Beast is. The best song on the album is Hallowed Be Thy Name, which is amazing. The way it starts off and then builds up, very cool. The whole album is great from start to finish. Then you get the follow-up to that, which is equally as good, which is Peace of Mind. In some ways, for me at least, better. Flight of Icarus, one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite song. Revelations is one of my favorite songs. Definitely those two in my top 5. Great drums, great killer vocals from Bruce. Great guitar work, great everything, great bass even. Just a wonder. And of course, Peace of Mind is the linchpin or the arch, the keystone in the arch because this is where they go down the prog rock rabbit hole with their Dune-inspired song "To Tame a Land." And that is a double-edged sword, because they even go further with that on Power Slave, which is a wonderful album because you have the epic track Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I teach romantic poetry. My favorite era of poetry is the British Romantics. Again, big fan of British culture. Byron, Shelley, Keats, Coleridge, Wordsworth, and Blake. Bruce Dickinson, a big Blake fan himself. We see that in his solo work and some stuff you can find on YouTube. And then you have 2 Minutes to Midnight, The Duelists, Big Aura. The whole album's great from start to finish. Aces High is wonderful. But again, like To Tame a Land and Rime of the Ancient Mariner is where I think they got too desirous to do prog. And that's where I kind of jump off the train, so to speak. Not yet, but so then you get, after Power Slave, you get Somewhere in Time. And at first, this album I thought was majorly disappointing, although I loved the hit on the album, which is, of course, Wasted Years, one of my favorite songs of all time by them. The guitar in there, the intro, and the way it opens and closes, coming full circle, is just amazing. We can relate to this. Throwing your life away, wasting time, Bruce had never sounded better, if I got the phrase right. He sounds wonderful, but this song is just this is, again, it's one of my top 5 songs, I believe, of Iron Maiden. It's just one of his best. I'll leave it at that. I'm not speaking correctly. Sometimes my tongue moves faster than my brain, or the other way around. I tell my students that all the time, much like the comedian Lewis Black. If you're a fan of him, he struggles with that. So sticking with Iron Maiden, you get the concept album. Remember, Iron Maiden, big fans of Jethro Tull, especially Bruce, I believe. They've done some covers, Cross-Eyed Mary and that kind of thing. And you get the just short of wonderful Seventh Son of the Seventh Son. And I love the way it ends, because it comes full circle with the way the album opens with Moonchild. So that's very thick as a brick like, and I think that's intentional. But compared to what came before, Seventh Son of the Seventh Son is missing something, the same way, or almost the same way, Somewhere in Time is missing something. But I did that. Those two albums that grow on me. Then you get to Fear of the Dark, and let's see, Fear of the Dark and No Prayer for the Dying. I forget which comes first. Both of these I was never a big fan of. I do like the title track, Fear of the Dark. I cannot stand Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. I think that song is laughable. Then you get the 2 Blaze Bayley albums, which I think are not very good at all. Very akin to what's going on with Judas Priest at the time with Tim Ripper Owens. Then you get the wonderful return to form, Brave New World. It's still not as good as the first 5, 6, or 7 albums, but at least we got kind of a return to form with, the horror movie themes, the Wicker Man, that kind of thing. But then everything after that is just taking what they did with To Tame a Land and Rime of the Ancient Mariner and just stretching it out too much. It's double albums, concept albums, or semi-concept albums with songs that are just way too long. The intro is long and boring, and the outro is long and boring, and they could be condensed with better resonance and more galloping and just whatever what many of us Iron Maiden fans want. So Iron Maiden number 6, now cracking the top 5, is King Crimson. First album is fabulous. I think inspired by the Moody Blues, Days of Future Past. Then you get the second album in Wake Up Poseidon, which is almost a twin album to the debut in many ways. Just checking on my cat. He's still wearing the cone. And the third album, Lizard, is quirky, it's circusy, pun intended. I like it, don't love it. Islands, I think, is an underrated gem. Almost from start to finish. There's a little left to be desired with the title track, but I do like it. It's not great, though. Then you get the wonderful trilogy that is Lark's Tongues and Aspic, Starless and Bible Black, and Red. One of the greatest album trilogies of all time. And then, for whatever reason, boredom, you have props. Robert Fripp breaks up the band, and we get this. The red, blue, and yellow era, or the Adrian Belew trilogy, as some people might call it, as I do. So Discipline. I like Frame by Frame, In Discipline, The Sheltering Sky, and Discipline. Do I love them? No. But I do like Discipline quite a bit. Of the three, this is my least favorite. Nick and Jack and Me is okay. Heartbeat I actually like. Satori and Tangier is okay. Waiting Man, Neurotica is amazing. That's why you get this album. Two Hands is okay. The Howler is okay. Requiem I do like. Then you get this, perhaps starting or jump-starting the industrial genre of rock. Three of a Perfect Pair I like. And I love Industry, hence industrial music maybe. No Warning is okay. I love Lark's Tongues and Aspic Part 3 is quite good. But all these three are very disappointing. I'm trying to remember who said this. I think it was Anthony Edwards. He's a wonderful channel guy over in England. His channel is just called Anthony Edwards, and he talks about, and he loves these three albums. He talks about however the trilogy that came before with John Wetton, or King Crimson kind of doing a Black Sabbath thing, is being tongue-in-cheek because they're heavy compared to what's here. And this is, as many people said, this is their Talking Heads era, and we say that because Adrian Belew was in the Talking Heads. And I love Adrian Belew as a guitar player. I love some of his vocals as well, but I blame Fripp more than anything for this watered-down version of the band. And there's some resurgence with the Power to Believe, and some of a lot of the live stuff is where it's at, even with Belew and even with the three-drummer period. But still, overall, very disappointing. Again, one of the top 20 bands that let me down the most. So that was number 5. Number 4 is Kiss. The first trilogy, the debut. We all know the production on these 3 albums are not very good, but most of the songs here are fabulous. The sophomore effort, Hotter Than Hell, is great from start to finish. Again, the production's not as great. Then with the third album, which I used to love as a kid, kind of a falling off for me now. There's some wonderful stuff on here like She and Rock and Roll All Night, although no guitar solo. But Getaway is phenomenal, Peter Criss led song. But songs like Two-Timer leave much to be desired, and there's another song, Ladies Room, is much to be desired. That's Rock and Roll Over. There's another song that I can't think of that's on here that's kind of like Two-Timer, that's very lackluster. But overall, the trilogy of the first 3 albums is wonderful. I have them in a collection called The Originals, kind of what was to Kiss, what the Archives was to Rush, the first 3 albums by Rush in one collection. The great package with the Starman logo on it. The Originals had, the cover was the Kiss 1 album cover, but you had a nuclear explosion superimposed over that, so it was a little different, which was really cool. Anyway, then you get Destroyer, which I really loved as a kid. Not so much now. I like maybe half of it. I think still great. Do You Love Me is phenomenal. I still love Detroit Rock City. I still love Beth. Anyway, and a couple other songs. And then Rock and Roll Over is the first studio album I ever bought. That I ever owned. The Originals came after that. And then the first Kiss album I ever owned was Alive. My mom got me that for Christmas. What a treat. Excuse me. Rock and Roll Over is, I think, one of their best albums of all time. Then you get Love Gun, which has some stellar tracks on it. It's not a perfect album, but it is a good album. Then after that, you get the solo albums. Ace is the best one. Paul's is okay. Gene, not so much. Peter, definitely not so much. Then you get Dynasty and Unmasked and The Elder. I love Dynasty. I think that's an underrated album. Although Charisma is a song I can do without, it's okay. X-Ray Eyes is okay. The Peter and Ace stuff there, I love. Of course, the Paul stuff there is wonderful. I Was Made for Loving You, Magic Touch, and Sure Know Something. Those are great. But Unmasked is a snooze fest except for 2 or 3 songs. When I heard that, I was so disappointed. I was like, boy, Kiss really let me down. And then The Elder as well. Then you get to come back with Creatures of the Night, and then they go into hair metal, take the makeup off. The makeup comes back on much later, but everything post Lick It Up was just one, for me, disappointment after another, including Revenge. There's a couple good songs in Revenge, but it's not the comeback album or the second comeback album like Creatures of the Night that so many people hail it to be. And I don't know what Kiss was thinking with doing a grunge album with Carnival of Souls. So Kiss coming at number 4. Number 3 is Heart. First 5 albums are fantastic for the most part, especially those first 2. They peaked too early like Dio. Their first album is their best album. Kind of a loose concept album about, Dreamboat Annie. Then you get Little Queen, which has their best song on it, Barracuda. And it's a very eclectic album because you have different types of songs. They're not the same type of rock music. Some acoustic, it's also light and shade. It's a very cool album, much different from the first album. Okay. And you get Magazine, which didn't come out right when it was supposed to. There's some wonderful moments there. I Got the Music in Me is not one of them, but there's some wonderful stuff there. But the album overall is a good album, not a great album. It's worth having. I own it in MP3 format. I'm having a difficult time getting it on CD. Then you get Baby Lestrange and Dog and Butterfly, or the other way around. Dog and Butterfly is wonderful. Mistral Wind is phenomenal, but the whole album I like. Baby Lestrange is, compared to the first 4, a little bit of a falling off, but still very good. And then you get, you get Passion Works and Private Audition, which I don't get at all. I remember turning to my sister when she pulls them out, and we look at each other and we're going. So I do have an honorable mention, which I'll put here, which would count as number 21. I just realized I need to include them. So let me write that down. I think you know who it is because I've talked about them before if you watch this channel a lot. So Heart, they have a comeback album with the self-titled Heart album, which is more commercial, but I do like it. Bad Animals has a couple good songs, but everything after that there's some good moments, but not enough to recapture the glory days of the first 5 albums. So Heart, very disappointing. Big letdown for me. Number 2 is Metallica. I'm not going to belabor this issue because one of my most recent videos I talked about, in my video about the most important bands of all time, they're one of them, and I went through, the personal relationship I had with the first 4 albums, so to speak, so I don't want to go over that again because I've done it already and bore you to death, but when you go from the purest thrash album, the best thrash album, one of the best heavy metal albums of all time with that debut, then that second album, which is almost as wonderful, the third album, kind of a combination of 1 and 2, also a masterpiece, and then the 4th album, despite the bass being low or non-present, is also a masterpiece, prog metal at its finest. And then you get the Black Album, and nothing's been the same ever since. Too bluesy, too commercial, too lackluster, too going through the motions, too much phoning it in, too much we don't care about it anymore. Hammett going on record to saying he's tired of playing the way he used to play, he's bored with it. So Metallica, number 2. Number 1 is Rush, and I have props for this one. So let me get them in order. Won't take very long. Well, as orderly as I can get them in my memory. Excuse me. So we have a few to show. So as you know, many a Rush fan, myself included, would say that Rush's best run is from the debut through and including Grace Under Pressure. But that includes Grace Under Pressure, Grace Under Pressure and Signals. These still are not as great as what came before. But compared to what follows, these are much better. So this is kind of like the linchpin or the keystone in the arch kind of thing. But it was still a letdown because you get the wonderful magnum opus that is Moving Pictures, where Neil Peart goes on record to saying, this is where it became Rush. And for some of us fans that upset us, I won't go in and explain why again. But if that's how you really feel, then why'd you put out these sounding albums? That's my question that I've never let go of. So I like these, but I don't love them. I would say these are good, but not great. Debut album's fantastic from the effort standpoint. Are all the tracks great? No, but what Rush is trying to achieve, the effort is phenomenal. Okay? The Cream-based, Led Zeppelin-esque, Hendrix-esque, working man guitar solo-wise is just phenomenal. You have 4 of the 8 or 9 songs that I think are wonderful. 2 of them are masterpieces. So, a nice debut album. Fly By Night, great sophomore effort. Neil's now in the band, gonna jazz things up. The 3rd album, kind of like a movie soundtrack. I've talked about this before. I think it's an underrated masterpiece. 2112, what can I say about that hasn't already been said by me and others? And then you get the Genesis-inspired, very English-inspired, because they're recording these next 2 albums in Wales. That is Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres, and then you get those could be a double album, right? And then you get the next 2 albums, which you can listen to as a double album, as I had, and that is the wonderful Permanent Waves, condensing their shtick into smaller songs, but still staying proggy, and then Moving Pictures doing the same thing. All right, but then after Grace Under Pressure and Signals, you get these 2 snoozers. I was disappointed initially when these 2 came out, and I warmed up to these quite a bit. This album I've never really truly warmed up to, except for Middletown Dreams, I Love, and Mystic Rhythms. All Side 2 is okay. Territories and Emotion Detector are okay songs, are good songs, but Middletown Dreams and Mystic Rhythms are fantastic. There was a time when I would listen to the first 3 songs on here, which are Force 10, Time Stands Still, well, the first 2, and I can't listen to them anymore. I just lost. It was the shine came off. It was just too pop, too commercial. Open Secrets is actually a good song. I like that one. Second Nature, Prime Mover, I don't like. Lock and Key is actually a decent song. Mission, I cannot stand. Turn the Page, Ty Shan, and High Water are horrible. I don't know what the band was thinking when they did this album. All right. Next is Roll the Bones. I cannot stand rap music for the most part. I don't know why the band decided to do that. But you have 3 really good songs on here in Dreamline, Bravado, and Ghost of a Chance. These are wonderful. Most of the rest of the songs on this album are too bubbly, and I don't do bubbly. Presto, I like the first and last song, and everything else in between I find uninspiring. Again, I don't know what the band was thinking. Their grunge album, in quotation marks, so don't get that. Animate is okay. Stick It Out is okay. Nobody's Hero is good. Animate, Stick It Out, and Nobody's Hero are good songs, but not great songs. I love Between Sun and Moon, and I love Double Agent, and I love Cold Fire. Everything else you can keep that I haven't mentioned. But still disappointing. Here, when I first heard the title track, Test for Echo, I thought Rush is Back has that but then the rest of the album was a disappointment, although Driven is quite good. I think Resist is a good song, a nice ballady, but everything else is just filler. And now this next album is their last album. There's much to like here, but compared to those first 10 or so albums, still a disappointment. Caravan I like, BU2B is great, Clockwork Angels not so much, The Anarchist not so much, Carnies is okay, Halo Effect is okay, Seven Cities of Gold is okay. I like the Wreckers. I love Headlong Flight. Got a little Caress of Steel going on here with the bass. BU2B2 is great. Wish Them Well is horrendous. And The Garden is very good. If not, well, it's good. It's not very good. So, disappointing, but I like much of the stuff here. They finally did a full-blown concept album, and it doesn't deliver fully. Now, I didn't show you Vapor Trails because I love Vapor Trails, and I didn't show you Snakes and Arrows because I love that album as well. Those were some comeback albums. So let me finally give my honorable mention. There are other bands who have disappointed me and who have let me down, but these 21 now are the ones who disappointed me the most, or rather let me down the most. And I'm still, you know, there are others and I've let them go. I've still not gotten over these. That's just how much these bands mean to me on a personal, deep level. They're part of who I am. So finally we come to Def Leppard, number 21. This should have been the first band that I mentioned. That first album is much like Led Zeppelin 1 in the sense that the debut is raw and unpolished, but there's some really cool songs there. 3 songs that are very heavy. The rest are quite rockin' as well. Wasted is amazing, heavy song. Okay, you got the wonderful Hello America. Not so much heavy, but a very good song. And then there's another one that's eluding me. Satellite is quite good. I love this whole album. I'm sorry, I like this whole album. And there are 3 songs that I just love to death. Rock Brigade, there's the other song that I love. That's pretty much kind of a heavy song. Then we get to High and Dry, which is great from start to finish. This is their heaviest album. I thought, seriously, because not just the music here, but the logo or the name of the band, Def Leppard, has the same phonetically sounding as Led Zeppelin to some degree. And rightfully so, because Pete Willis sounds like the reincarnated version, if you will, though Jimmy's still alive. Thank goodness. The next Jimmy Page. I thought that the way Badfinger was supposed to be the heir apparent to the Beatles, I thought Def Leppard was going to be the heir apparent to Led Zeppelin. Nope. I'll get to that in a minute. But High and Dry is just amazing. It's heavy, it's raw, but polished. You have one ballad or two, Bringing on the Heartbreak, which is still an amazing ballad, and then it runs into Switch 625, the instrumental that's heavy. I cannot play those alone. I have to play them both together. When I'm done with this video, I'm probably going to play them and jam out. But you have Let It Go, which is so... Joe Elliott's voice is just so heavy on this album. His vocal presence, the whole band's presence is amazing. Okay. Another Hit and Run, probably my favorite song on here, is fabulous. No, No, No is great. Anyway, so High and Dry, one of my favorite albums of all time. One of my favorite new wave of British heavy metal albums of all time. One of my favorite albums of all time all around, regardless of genre. Then we get to Pyromania. Pete Willis is out, although he plays on 2 or 3 tracks. He's out because he decides he's got to deal with his alcoholism. And you bring over from Girl, Phil Collen. Wrong way to go. You should have gotten someone with the same styles, guitar stylings, to keep that heaviness. And again, Joe Elliott calls this band the glam band. I don't hear glam. I hear maybe a hint of it because of the hair metal-y that is starting to seep in Pyromania, but it is still a great album from start to finish, although it's much different from High and Dry. There's some similarities to High and Dry, but not totally, okay? So there's some wonderful deep cuts. There's some wonderful deep cuts here with Billy's Got a Gun, right? Coming Under Fire, Action Not Words, okay? We all know what the hits on this album are, but still a great album. And then you get into Hysteria. Again, I turn to my sister. my sister and I would put on new albums when we get them and share them and listen to them. And I remember this like it was yesterday. Judas Priest's Turbo. Although I failed to mention, I love that song Out of the Cold. Judas Priest's Turbo, Def Leppard's Hysteria, and those two hard albums I mentioned, Passion Works and Private Audition. We turned to each other the whole time the album was playing and going, oh my God, what did they do? What happened? What happened? So disappointing, such a letdown. So there you have it, folks. These are the 21 bands that have let me down the most, and I'm still carrying that letdown with me today. Why? Because these bands mean so much to me. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. God bless. Bye.